Hello and welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Ichigo Kurasaki history. Ichigo awakens to find he is in Mr. Urahara's shop, but he has been severely injured, and Urahara tells him that if he moves, his death will be inevitable. Rukia has been taken to the Soul Society, with no way of following her. Or is there? Mr. Urahara tells him that he has a way, but Ichigo has no soul reaper powers anymore, and he will most likely die in his current condition. But Mr. Urahara also tells him that he can help with that. Ichigo is given some pills to help him recover. The next day, Ichigo goes to his last day of school. After school, the last day in fact, Ichigo meets Orihime, the girl who possibly has a crush on him, asks where Rukia had gone. But nobody else at school remembered. How is it possible that Orihime had remembered, but nobody else? I will tell you. During Ichigo and Uryu's hollow contest, both Orihime and Chad had unlocked powers of their own, Chad being given a powerful arm, while Orihime had been granted little fairies that spawned from her hair clips to protect her with a shield, to attack, and also to heal, depending on the combination in which they are summoned. Orihime has decided to join Ichigo to rescue Rukia, along with Chad. Ichigo goes to Urahara's shop to train, and he is taken deep under the shop to what looks like a near-endless desert area. Urahara then releases Ichigo's spirit form, and Ichigo is in normal clothes with a chain on his chest, and he is also very, very weak. Urahara puts Ichigo through some rigorous training to help him get his soul reaper powers back, and in the end, Ichigo's chain is cut and begins to dissolve. He is then tossed into a deep, deep hole, and tied and bound with some high-level Kido performed by Mr. Urahara's assistant, Mr. Tessai. Who are these people? How do they know so much about the Soul Reapers? In the end, all of this will be revealed. But right now, Ichigo's chain is completely dissolved, and he starts to scream and try to break out of his bonds. As the screaming intensified, a white substance begins to flow from Ichigo's mouth, and Ichigo now had a hole in his chest where his soul chain once was. Urahara observes that this is odd, that the hollow form is coming from his mouth and not the hole in his chest. Mr. Tessai is growing anxious and wants to seal Ichigo and destroy him. It is then that Ichigo finds himself in a strange place. This is a common thread for Ichigo. He is laying on the side of a building, appearing to defy gravity. In the distance there is a long-haired man wearing sunglasses and a long duster. But his presence felt ominous, but natural, like an old friend. He happened to be standing on top of a flagpole that jutted out of the side of the building. When Ichigo stood up, everything changed. The stranger's orientation changed, and gravity was somehow switched back on. Ichigo begins to plummet towards the street below, and the stranger followed. As they came ever closer to the ground, the stranger tells him that he has a hidden power within him. He has his own Soul Reaper powers. Byakuya only destroyed the powers given to him by Rukia. As they fall ever closer to the ground, the building begins to crumble and turn into boxes. The stranger tells Ichigo that he must find his powers hidden within the boxes. And in that moment, Ichigo remembers what Uryu had told him before about Soul Reaper spirit energy, that it was a different color. It was red. Ichigo searches through the boxes, and he finds it. But on the outside, Ichigo's body is being consumed by the emerging hollow, and Tessai has to use the next phase of the sealing Kido. Then, as the final seal is in place, an explosion from the shaft sends something flying out. As the dust settled, a figure stood, wrapped in bandages, a hollow mask, with a kimono and a zanpakuto. Who was it? It was Ichigo. He cracks the mask with the hilt that is in his hand. It is time for Ichigo's final lesson. It's simple. All he has to do is knock Mr. Urahara's hat off. Ichigo is eager and sets a 5-minute limit. Urahara then draws a blade that is hidden within his cane. And Urahara's blade is clearly a Zanpakuto, and it is also in his Shikai form. But Ichigo has nothing but a hilt. What choice does he have but run? He is then met by the stranger from before, from in his inner world. Why are you running? He asks. He then reveals his name. It's Zangetsu. It is the first time Ichigo has heard his name, and he tells him that he has been screaming it for so long. Ichigo stops, turns around, and calls out his name, Zangetsu. This turns his hilt into a Zanpakuto, but it is no ordinary Zanpakuto. It is in its Shikai form. It's as long as his body once again, and it is black and silver like all Shikai. But Ichigo's Zanpakuto has no hilt, it has no guard, and it kind of reminds me of a giant kitchen knife. Ichigo tells Urahara that he may not be able to hold back. He swings Zangetsu, and a flash of energy races towards him. Urahara defends it with his Zanpakuto, but now he is hatless. Ichigo's back. He has his Soul Reaper powers once again. Ichigo had a normal next couple of days. However, on the 7th day, he gets summoned to Urahara's shop, and before he leaves, his dad gives him an amulet that his mother had given to him once before. Ichigo is very hesitant to take it, but Isshin tells him to return it once he gets back from his journey. On the way to Urahara's shop, he meets with Orihime, who is also going to Urahara's shop. But she is not the only one. So are Chad and Uryu, all wanting to rescue Rukia. As they head into the training area where Urahara reveals the means of getting to the Soul Society, it was through what is known as a Senkaimon. This is a portal, and it can only remain open for 4 minutes. And Urahara tells them that if they don't make it within 4 minutes, they will most certainly die. Oh, and there is another member who Ichigo had yet to meet, and its name is Yoroichi. And Yoroichi is a cat, but not just an ordinary cat, a cat who can speak. The Senkaimon is opened and they run for it. As they run, a weird sludge is flowing behind them, sealing off the exit that they had just come from. They continue to run, and Uryu gets stuck in the sludge, and Chad has to rescue him. Just then, a strange creature appears from the sludge. It is known as the Cleaner, Yoroichi says, and its job is to clean the portal between the world of the living and the Soul Society of all the dead that are left. It is nearly upon them, and Orihime uses her powers, her shield to protect them, and they are flung into the West Rukon district of the Soul Society. The whole place is completely deserted. As Ichigo heads towards the wall that is clearly that of the Soul Society Serete, he is stopped by the gatekeeper, a literal giant by the name of Jidanbo. And Ichigo challenged him in a clearly David versus Goliath battle for access into the Soul Society Serete. Jidanbo, armed with his 2 axes, pounds and pounds at Ichigo and is unable to defeat him. And Ichigo tells him and the rest of the crew that he didn't do nothing for the 7 days prior to getting here after getting his Soul Reaper powers. He trained with Urahara that whole time and got stronger. Upon defeating Jidanbo, he allows them entrance through the gate. Jidanbo opens the gate and holds it as Ichigo calls his friends forward. But the giant Jidanbo gasped in terror as he spied through the gate that there was someone coming towards it. It was none other than Captain of Squad 3, Jin Ichimaru, who has an odd snake-looking face, and he is still a ways away, but somehow he manages to hit Jidanbo with something. What was it? Was it his Zanpakuto? With nothing holding the gate open, and Jidanbo lying on the ground injured, the massive gate closes shut, sealing them off from the Soul Society. Once the gate was shut, the once desolate Rukon district started to show signs of activity. The people saw that Orihime had started to heal Jidanbo. The village elder tells them of another way in, and the team go off and find Ganju Shiba. But the first thing that he wants to do is fight them. But he then changes his mind as he notices that Ichigo might be more powerful than he is, and he took them to his sister, Kakaku Shiba. She had a way of getting in, breaking through the invisible shield that was in place above the Serete, which was called the Seki Seki Wall. It completely surrounded the Serete above and below. The next day, she took them to the place where her special cannonballs for breaking through the Seki Seki Wall were held, and launches them in her firework cannon. But something goes wrong as they are all separated. When they land in the Serete, Ichigo meets his first two real Soul Reapers in the Soul Society. But luckily, he only has to face off against one of them. His name was Ikkaku Madarame, the third seat of Squad 11. Ikkaku, being third seat, is a formidable opponent. But the thing about Squad 11 is that they are known to be the strongest squad in all of the Soul Society. So Ichigo has his work cut out for him. But Ikkaku also has his work out for him, as he is forced to release his sword and take Ichigo on with his Shikai, something that he rarely does. He usually fights with his sword and sheath, one in each hand, one for attack and one for defend. But Ichigo figures it out, because his skills are growing with each day, and he beats Ikkaku. Ichigo doesn't kill him though. He heals his wounds, well, he tends to them at least, using a special ointment that Ikkaku had held in his zanpakuto. Ikkaku, laying there, almost dead, asks Ichigo as he walks away, "Who is the strongest among you?" Ichigo tells him that he is. Ikkaku then warns him to keep an eye out for his captain, for he will want to fight him. His captain's name was Kenpachi Zaraki, and he only fights the strongest opponents that he can find. Ganju and Ichigo are running around trying to find Rukia, or at least where she's being held, while also avoiding discovery by the Soul Reapers who are searching for them. They are eventually surrounded by Soul Reapers on all four sides. In order to escape, they take a hostage, a squad member of Squad 4, Hanataro, who, upon discovering their plan was to free Rukia, agrees to assist them. Then they decide to use the sewers for cover to evade capture and more confrontation with the Soul Reapers. And the second that they go above ground, they are faced with yet another Soul Reaper. This guy was familiar to Ichigo, as Ichigo was familiar to him. It was none other than Renji Abarai. And this is a rematch that Ichigo has been waiting for. No, yearning for. And Ichigo is gravely wounded during this fight, as Renji is a lieutenant, and Ichigo has still not mastered all of his new Soul Reaper powers. But he doesn't falter. He actually gets stronger. And how can this be? Well, see, during the fight, Ichigo's power starts to rise as he got injured, and he uses a powerful Getsuga Tensho to turn the tide and beat Renji. Renji then asks Ichigo to do one thing as he lay there: save Rukia. Since above ground is yet again swarming with Soul Reapers, they retreat to the sewers once again. Hanataro uses his healing skills to heal Ichigo, and in the process he finds the source of Ichigo's immense power. Well, something odd at least. Hidden within Ichigo's kimono was a hollow mask, the same one that he had on after emerging as a Soul Reaper in Urahara's training area. But this can't be, because Ichigo destroyed it. They can't remain hidden forever. But what Ichigo doesn't know is that he is being hunted. Hunted by Kenpachi Zaraki and his lieutenant Yachiro, who is acting as Kenpachi's compass and guiding him to where the strong person is, as she calls it. And he finally tracks him down. Ichigo could sense the murderous intent emanating from Kenpachi, so much so that he felt as if there was a knife around his neck. And then he feels a stabbing sensation, as if he had been run through with a zanpakuto. It is then that he senses the spiritual pressure, and it grows stronger and stronger, and it becomes harder for Ichigo and the others to move. Just then a voice comes from behind. "What's the matter with you? How long are you going to keep looking over there?" The gravel-toned, battle-hardened Kenpachi roared. Ichigo was still inexperienced at detecting spiritual pressure. Kenpachi was elated, almost bursting with happiness at a fight with someone new, someone strong. But Ichigo doesn't have time for this. Kenpachi already was aware of Ichigo, as Ikkaku had told him everything about their fight. And he was going to fight with Ichigo to the death, as this was his style. And then Yachiro appears from behind Kenpachi, and she is a mere child, and Ichigo is wondering how she is able to stand under this immense spiritual energy. Ichigo decides to power up and take his stance, and Kenpachi says, "You can have a free hit. Strike at me, cut my neck, stab me in the eye, do whatever you want." And Ichigo strikes, and it has no effect on Kenpachi, and Kenpachi knew that this would have that exact effect. It only caused Ichigo to hurt his own hand. Yachiro tells Ichigo that he can't cut Ken with that blade, because to him it is almost blunt. You see, Kenpachi's spiritual energy is so high that Ichigo's pressure is being pushed down, and his zanpakuto is unable to break his skin. Ichigo struggles on, and he faces him and faces him. And he does eventually manage to cause a small cut by focusing his energy into the tip of his blade. But when Kenpachi pierces Zangetsu with his murderous blade, Ichigo retreats into his inner self once again. It is now that he is faced against somebody new. Not just Zangetsu, but there is a reverse of him. And he has Zangetsu. He has his blade. And Ichigo is standing there with nothing but a regular zanpakuto. Ichigo states that he might as well be holding a broomstick. Ichigo now learns that a Soul Reaper and a zanpakuto are meant to fight as one. And once he figures this out, he stands up from where he lay, taking Kenpachi off guard. Ichigo was different now. There was something building within him. Kenpachi notes that his energy is increasing, but he was almost dead a moment ago. This time, Ichigo had conviction. Upon striking Kenpachi, he accidentally hit Kenpachi's mysterious eye patch, and this was no ordinary eye patch. Kenpachi had it made to eat his spiritual pressure so that he could fight for longer and enjoy it. Kenpachi was now powering up to his full extent, but so was Ichigo. Zangetsu was now by his side, pushing him, powering him up, and Ichigo could hear Kenpachi's sword cry and scream in pain. With their powers at their max, they attempted one final strike, and Ichigo falls. But so does Kenpachi. Ichigo stood up against the captain, and then Yoruichi comes and rescues him. But how is a cat going to help? Again, Ichigo awakes in a strange place. But, like all of us, Ichigo wonders how a cat was able to carry a human. Yoruichi then reveals his little secret. Yoruichi began to morph, changing from a black house cat to a naked woman standing in front of Ichigo, who was not just in shock, he was embarrassed. Ichigo protests that she put on some clothes. Yoruichi asks, "Is this the first time you've seen a woman naked?" and teases Ichigo a little bit more. Ichigo is badly wounded, and his wounds start to reopen. It is then that he detects a spiritual pressure that he recognizes. After Yoruichi had shown him how she had managed to get Ichigo to this hideout, Ichigo then jumps up, grabs it, and runs for the door, leaping into the air as he activates the artifact and starts to fly off. The spiritual pressure he had sensed was that of Byakuya, the Soul Reaper who had killed him before. Ichigo was all bandaged up and still wounded, but he is doing much better than the last time that he faced off against Byakuya. But Ichigo is still no match for him, and as Byakuya starts to power up and intend on releasing his sword, Yoruichi steps in and stops Byakuya from releasing it by constricting it in bandages. She then knocks Ichigo out and tells Byakuya that in 3 days Ichigo will be stronger than him, and they escaped capture. But they had to leave Rukia, Ganju, and Hinataro behind. Yoruichi takes Ichigo to yet another training area, similar to that of the one beneath Urahara's shop where he had trained before. It is here where she intends to teach Ichigo Bankai, using an invention of Urahara's, but he has to complete it within 3 days, or he will die. Yoruichi begins to ask if he accepts and telling him about the danger of the death. Ichigo says nothing, only stabs the body of the tool and forces Zangetsu to materialize and begins his Bankai training. You see, like I said before, Ichigo's blade is always in Shikai, and the Bankai is the next level of release. And it varies from person to person. And we haven't yet seen a Bankai up to this point, but all captains must obtain Bankai to become a captain. The only exception to all of this is Kenpachi. The reason being is the 2 ways of becoming a captain is by A, gaining Bankai, or B, defeating the previous captain in open combat with 1,000 people witnessed, which Kenpachi did. The Bankai has the ability to increase the user's power 10-fold. Now Ichigo, having forced Zangetsu into submission and trying to obtain his Bankai, Zangetsu has made multiple swords to get Ichigo to prove that he is worthy of Bankai, worthy of his power. As time ticks on, Ichigo slowly makes progressions. Instead of having the sword break each time he gets struck, he can now keep it for 1 or 2 strikes. The first day's training is over. But on the second day, Ichigo gets a visitor bearing some bad news. It's Renji, and first he tells him that Rukia's execution has been moved forward to the next day at noon. And also, he asks if he can stay here and train for Bankai. He had already managed to materialize his Zanpakuto, and it is a monkey with the tail of a snake. He says it will not take him very long to achieve Bankai. Ichigo now has no choice but to up his ante, and asks Zangetsu to go harder on him. Zangetsu then makes many copies of himself, and they all face him at once. Ichigo is exhausted, and Zangetsu asks if he can still stand. Ichigo states that he can, because he has sworn to save Rukia. When Zangetsu asks who he swore this to, Ichigo responds he swore the oath on his own soul. Rukia is now at the execution grounds, and she is held aloft, high above the ground. The Sokyoku, or the sword that is going to destroy Rukia completely, sealed in front of her. The head captain gives the order to release the Sokyoku, but Rukia notices that there are not a lot of people here to witness her execution. As the Sokyoku begins to release, it becomes a form of a giant phoenix engulfed in flame, and she notes in her head that it is said that the Sokyoku had the power equivalent to that of 1 million Zanpakuto. It rushes forth, and Rukia seems to have accepted her fate. But as she opens her eyes, she notices that the Sokyoku has stopped. But who had the power to stop 1 million Zanpakutos? It was Ichigo. He stands mid-air with his Zanpakuto at his back, brazen and delighted to have stopped this force. Rukia is equally shocked, overcome with emotion at first, then annoyed that Ichigo was there. The Sokyo stood mid-air and backs up for another strike at them. But by some dumb luck, two of the onlookers, two captains to be precise, had been covertly scheming and trying to put a stop to this execution also. It was Captains Shunsui and Jushiro, two of the first to become captains of the court card squad. Shunsui wore a straw hat and a pink lady's kimono, while Jushiro was a normal, be it sickly looking man. But don't let their outward appearance reflect their power and skill. Jushiro had a shield in his hand bearing the Shihoin house crest. With this, they destroyed the powerful Sokyoku. Why is the Shihoin an important crest, I hear you ask? Why is this in the possession of two captains from the court guard squad? You see, Yoroichi, well, her family name is Shihoin, so we can assume that she had a hand in all of this, since she had been missing for most of the adventures that prequeled all of this until she found Ichigo. With the Sokyoku taken care of, Ichigo frees Rukia by destroying the execution stand with a single strike. Ichigo and Rukia share a heartfelt moment, just before Renji appears. Then Ichigo takes her and flings her towards him, telling him to get Rukia to safety. Renji does so since he is in no shape to face off against anyone at this point since he had just finished fighting with Byakuya. Renji picks up his friend and makes his getaway. The head captain Yamamoto and two other captains, Captain Soifon and Reitzo Unahana, send their respective lieutenants after Renji and Rukia. But Ichigo steps in using Flash Step. Byakuya is the one who had shown him this Flash Step and he figured it out himself. He thrusts Zangetsu into the dirt as the lieutenants release their Zanpakutos, and Ichigo defeats all three with his bare hands. Ichigo then reaches for Zangetsu as Captain Kuchiki attacks. I told you I can see you, Byakuya Kuchi, Ichigo declares insolently. Crossing swords, Byakuya asks Ichigo why he keeps trying to save Rukia, but Ichigo counters and asks why Byakuya is not trying to save her. They parry and push away. The pair seem to be evenly matched, blocking and deflecting each consecutive slash. They separate, and Ichigo says with the cheekiest grin that Byakuya must be going easy on him, and goads him to release his Bankai. Byakuya tells him that he is unworthy of the power of his Bankai, so he instead releases his Shikai, Zenbon Zakura. It is like 1,000 cherry blossom leaves lilting in the wind, which is what his Shikai is called, 1,000 cherry blossoms. The tiny blades move towards Ichigo at great speed. Ichigo swings his blade, releasing his Getsugo Tensho at Byakuya. When the dust settles, Byakuya has no glove on his arm, and he is wounded. Byakuya is curious as to what it was. When Ichigo tells him, he laughs. It is the meaning of Getsugo Tensho that he finds so funny. Piercer of heaven. Ichigo still wants to see his Bankai. This time, he obliges, and Byakuya drops his blade, which vanishes into the ground, and a procession of pink blades appear behind him and subsequently break into millions of tiny blades. Ichigo does his best to avoid the blades. There are simply too many. They ambush him from the rear and catch him, and he plummets to the ground. Stumbling to his feet with the help of his Zanpakuto, Ichigo tells Byakuya that he was foolish to think that he could beat his Bankai with just his Shikai. Byakuya insults Ichigo for his ignorance and to choose his words carefully. He could not have achieved Bankai. Only those of noble blood have the ability, and even then, not all can truly master Bankai. Ichigo begins to gather his spiritual energy. A bright blue aura envelops Ichigo, and he swings Zangetsu forward, pointing it directly at Byakuya, and cries out, Bankai. His spiritual energy increases and shoots out of Zangetsu. A torrent of dust and energy swirl around Ichigo, and as it clears, Ichigo stands in different clothing, with a new zanpakuto, Tensa Zangetsu, a name fitting for his Bankai. It means Heaven's Chain Slaying Moon. Byakuya scoffs at Ichigo's new blade. You see, it's much smaller than it was previously. Byakuya thinks that Ichigo is making light of the Soul Reaper pride. Byakuya then recalls all the blade fragments to form many blades. Just then, Ichigo takes what appears to be a single step, and his new zanpakuto is thrust to the throat of Byakuya. But Ichigo does not kill him, but backs away again. In disbelief, Byakuya attacks Ichigo with Zenbon Zakura's many blades. This is when Tensa Zangetsu's true power is revealed. Ichigo's Bankai compresses his spiritual pressure into a smaller, sleeker blade, but as a result gave him amazing strength and speed. Ichigo is now faster than Zenbon Zakura. Byakuya has to resort to using his hands to control the blades, which makes him almost twice as fast. As the thousands of blades surround Ichigo, he believed that he had defeated Ichigo finally. But Ichigo slashes furiously and hits every single blade. Ichigo then appears behind Byakuya once again. Ichigo attacks. Byakuya had no time to protect himself with his blades, and resorted to his bare hands to deflect the blade. As a result, he is severely wounded. They separate and jump apart as Byakuya removes the blade. Byakuya, finally serious, resorts to showing Ichigo his final form, as hundreds of pink blades form behind him and rotate around his head. Reaching out, a blade drops and is dispensed to his open hand. As the fight continues, Ichigo begins to slow, thinking Byakuya's new power was making him faster. Byakuya immobilizes him with a blade to the foot, and as he is about to be struck down by a Kido Hado number 4, a weak Kido, but from a skilled user, the blade is removed, and Ichigo collapses. Ichigo has now reached his limit, and Byakuya knows it. Byakuya is about to conclude the battle. With a blade summoned and above his head, it is at that very moment, in his pain and almost at the breaking point of his body, Ichigo changes. A hollow mask starts to form on his face. His movements are now erratic. His voice is full of auto-tune. But it was what was on his face that really tricked Byakuya. His eyes were black, and he was not responding to Byakuya's calls. Ichigo was no longer home. Ichigo, or whatever he's going by at this point, now had the upper hand, and was slashing and casting a new style of Getsugo Tensho. No longer was it just blue, it was now black and red, and full of evil energy. With Ichigo in his new form, almost hollow form, he managed to injure Byakuya. But as hollow form Ichigo was about to finish off his foe, Ichigo regained control, ripped off the mask, and had no memory of what just transpired. But he knows that they are both now on equal footing, with maybe enough gas in the tank for one final attack. As they power up their new attacks, Byakuya promises to tell Ichigo why he didn't try to save Rukia if he manages to win, following their final clash. Even if he was stumbling, Ichigo was upright, and Byakuya was not. After the fight had concluded, Ichigo was healed by Orihime, who, along with Uryu, Chad, Ganjo, and Yachiro, were watching from a safe distance in the forest. But then a message from the lieutenant of Squad 4, Isana Ketsuko, revealed that all the goings-on in the Soul Society were planned, masterminded by Sosuke Aizen. He had faked his own death, played everyone like a fiddle. But the one thing that he did not count on was Ichigo's will and power to continue to fight. Ichigo, though not fully healed, confronts Aizen. He had brought Renji and Rukia back to the execution grounds, demanding that Renji release her. Renji, of course, refuses and is struck down by Aizen. He was after one thing, the Hokyoku, a device that would allow the barrier between the Soul Reaper and Hollow to be lifted, destroyed, if you will. Where was it? It was hidden inside Rukia. It is then that the savage animal captain Sajin Kamamura rushed Aizen, but he is swatted away like a fly. Even Ichigo's Bankai is no match for Aizen, who is able to stop it with his bare hands. Aizen then explains that in order to remove the Hokyoku, the body that it was hidden in either needed to be vaporized by, let's say, the power of the Sokyoku, which was destroyed, or by a means to reach into the body and pull it out. This is what Aizen intends to do. In doing this, a hole is formed in Rukia's chest, and from it, a shielded box with what looked like a small black die hidden inside. But Aizen was not alone. Aizen had two traitors with him, two other captains, Gin Ichimaru and Tosen. Aizen and his traitorous cohorts then escaped to Wako Mundo, the world of the Hollows, and nobody followed them. This concludes the first two parts of Ichigo. What was the power that took control of Ichigo? What is Aizen's true endgame? Find out next time on All Geeks Aside. Now, if anyone who's listening still has any suggestions for any characters that they would like to hear, you can do so over on my social media. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and the notes will be in the show notes with links, but it is at All Geeks Aside on all platforms. Also, I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon. It's not a lot, and it's great that I have so many fans or friends that are willing to help me in such a way. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to the people over at the Podcast We Listen To group and Underdog podcast groups on Facebook. There's powerful work going on there for indie podcasts, and you learn something new every day from anyone that's in these groups. Thank you very much. See you next time.